there, jammers. This is Ryan Bound from the University of Utah. Let's talk found art and how to use them in your game. Well, found art or found objects actually has been around for a long time, over 100 years. And the first to publicly utilize the idea was Pablo Picasso. Now, Michel Duchamp is thought to have perfected the concept several years later when he made a series of ready-mades consisting of completely unaltered everyday objects selected by Duchamp, and he designated them as art. The most famous piece is Fountain, seen in the bottom right, which is nothing more than a urinal tipped over on its side and put on a pedestal. So what about games? Well, found art in games are typically ready-made digital assets, 2D or 3D, shared in communities supporting open source or assets that fall under fair use. We're going to take a look at the following: open source, fair use, and then self-authored. You probably have a camera on your phone and have lots of pictures on it. Open source art in games are 2D and 3D assets which are free to use by anyone. To the left is a list of 5 popular portals or websites where you can go right now and download hundreds of objects and assets by color, theme, size, you name it. Now, what happens when you have the perfect idea and you type into Google, I need cute cat images or whatever, and they're not free to use. They're somebody's images. Well, the following is not legal advice. I am not an attorney. However, I did take the time to take a look at the most common areas of fair use and how it relates to content in games, and I have a few examples to help us better understand how we can use images and assets that we find on the internet in our next project. So, what is fair use? It is a doctrine in the law of the United States that permits limited use of copyrighted material without having to first acquire permission from the copyright holder. Now, first is transformative use. Is a derivative work is transformative if it uses a source work in completely new or unexpected ways. 2 examples. The image on the left is of the Mona Lisa, and you can see that the artist used either a marker or a pen to put a goatee and mustache on her. So, while visually there hasn't been a lot done to the image, conceptually it has changed drastically. Okay, the image to the right is actually from a very recent study where the artist took a picture of the mayor of Wisconsin and ran it through a posterizing filter to create the image to the right to sell. And this came under a court case where the artist on the right won that it was under fair use and for transformative because the judge determined that the image to the right could have been created from any snapshot of the mayor. Here's an example. I Googled wooden planks, I put it into Photoshop, and I used a few filters, and I got a texture that looks similar to Fortnite. What about the second area of fair use? De minimis. It's just a fancy way of saying about minimal things. Here's a diagram, a few diagrams to help us understand that. The smaller the portion of the asset that you use, the more likely it is to be fair. And if you borrow from the heart of the work, it's usually less likely to be fair. So if you had an image of a portrait, if you borrowed just the face versus the edge, you get the idea. Let's take a look at the same example. The same wood planks from the internet, I took 1 knot from that image. Hopefully that would be fair use. What about parodies? Parodies are spoofs. They're fun. They're a critique of the asset or the subject. Then, in my opinion, ones that are good tend to have a little bit of truth in it or a message. Let's just take a look at these 3 examples. Big Mac, and you can see the hamburger is in the icon of the Apple Mac. Are they making a little jab that Big Macs aren't healthy like apples? Maybe. Someday I Will Get Served is a parody on Subway. You can tell, you know that because it's in the same font. And if you've been to a Subway recently, like I have, even during the busiest hours, there seems to only be 2 people working there. And sometimes it takes a long time to get your sub. The last one, Oops, Consider It Gone. Again, you can tell that this is a parody on UPS because of the logo and the font. Apparently, this person has sent a few packages that didn't end up where they were intended. And so it's a commentary on that. So from my example, the wood planks that I got from the internet, and I wanted to make a parody on Hollywood. The literal interpretation of my parody is Holly on Wood or Hollywood. Now, the conceptual parody is Tinseltown has a tendency to put glam on tops of things or a false facade. So here you have some pine planks, which are rather cheap, with holly directly on top, hiding them. Similar to Hollywood. So parody is not only a literal translation of the word, but a social commentary on Hollywood culture. What about personal photography? If you have a cell phone, you probably have a camera on it. So this last summer, my wife and I went on a trip to Montana and visited a bunch of the abandoned mining towns. On the left is a picture of a wood floor similar to wooden planks. And what I did is I ran it through the same filter and got very similar results to the image that I found online. And just for fun, I put it through another set of filters to make some pixel art. I could just use the image just as is. I own the photograph, and so I could use that in the game or run it through some filters to keep style consistency. So in conclusion, what is found art in games? Well, in short, they're ready-made assets. They're as is. You're just going to use what you find, or you're using ready-made assets as a great starting point. So here's a pro tip. Asset creation is one of the most time-consuming and resource-intensive parts of creating a game. It doesn't matter if you're a large, established, multi-million-dollar AAA studio, or it's just a couple of your friends over the weekend doing a game jam. Creating content and assets takes time, and found art can be a great way to speed up that process. I hope this helped you, and I can't wait to see what you make at your next game jam.